This is the Truth Network.
Hidden treasures of the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Oh, we get to do some math today as we are digging into the 6th chapter of the Song of Solomon. And again, this would be the 8th verse that we're up to today, which is the miracle verse, the het verse, the verse of union. And I think you'll see that all over this verse in so many different ways. It's really a rather remarkable verse. And I'll just read it in English, and then we're going to do some math. So the verse reads, "There are threescore queens, fourscore concubines, and virgins without number." And so again, like I said, there's math. There are threescore is the idea of a score is 20. So there's 60 queens, and there's 80 concubines, and virgins without numbers. Well, beautifully, the Jews have given us this number, what they feel like it is, for years and years. Rashi has a complete description, and I'll give it to you there in the show notes on the podcast. But essentially, it is that there are 60 of essentially Abraham's family that are considered to be the real queens. And so they're families, but they're 60 of Abraham's families, and that's what they feel like Solomon was referring to as the queens. And then the concubines, the fourscore, and he's done all the math, and you'll see it all there at christiancarguy.com in the show notes. The fourscore concubines are the 80 families, the Noahide families. In other words, the ones that came out of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Those guys out of Noah's family. There are what they consider to be 80 families, and then virgins without number. In other words, take those two families, and then off you go, and you get all sorts of numbers that are certainly in there. I'd also point out that that Abraham was 80 when, I think he was 86 when Ishmael was born, which is significant, and Isaac was 60 or threescore when Jacob was born. And so those numbers, again, are significant when you think about, obviously, what this is pointing to. It's pointing to that, there was a lot of math. God really did a whole lot of stuff to make sure that you existed exactly. In other words, it was no mistake whatsoever that God set this all in motion in order to happen, just like it was no mistake that you have 32 teeth, or there were 32 generations to Jesse, and there's no doubt that however many seeds are in a pomegranate, that there was a lot of math involved in that number. And so you can see that from the 6th, 7th, and 8th verse, they all have to do with some numbering that's going to lead up to the 9th verse, which is beautiful. We're going to get to that. But right now, we just want to see that Jesus essentially is saying, do the math. You have what it takes. In other words, he put together all these different people all throughout history that you would be precisely who you are. And that I can assure you, he has done the math. And, this is no accident that you've got this. And so one of the core questions that everybody asks in some way is, do I have what it takes? Am I what God had in mind? Aren't I, not measuring up in some way, shape, or form? But here he wants you to do the math. He's telling you, look, I put together a whole lot of things. There were a whole lot of people in your history that you would come and that you would be precisely the person that I want you to be to precisely perform the function for your place in the story. In other words, we've all got a verse that we're supposed to sing, according to, the poem that Robin Williams read. But we all have a verse. What will your verse be? And again, you have exactly what God gave you in order to be able to perform that verse. And I think this is more than beautiful that, again, if we just simply look at our own lives, because the virgins without numbers is in other words, you had these unbelievable queens that came out of Abraham's family. You had all the important families that came out of Noah's family. But then there's all these different people that led up right up until your mother, right? And your father. And interestingly, they're all female because, again, we are all the bride of Christ. And, of course, this leads up to the exact same idea of the church has what it takes. In other words, he put all this in place. And the way that I think this plays out is, last Sunday, since I help with land and rescue, and we, help with human trafficking around the world, but we've also done a lot, or land and rescue's done a lot in the Ukraine lately. And we had a lady by the name of Anna, and she had come to show all that these 7 churches were doing in Ukraine in order to help all the displaced people that were all, there were doctors, lawyers, all sorts of people had wonderful careers who have lost everything, and they're all fleeing. They're all refugees. And, a lot of them are refugees within the country, but who's taking care of them, okay? and pay attention to who this is. It's the church, right? And the pastor mentioned this from the pulpit. He said, you can ask almost any government, and they will tell you who takes care of people when there's some kind of tragedy. It's the bride of Christ every time, right? It's the Baptist men or Samaritan's Purse or all these different things, and don't miss that the church is what is beautiful here. And believe me, he's trying to show you why the church is number one when it comes to how he looks at it, because they're the ones that truly care. Right? They're the ones who build hospitals. There's the one that build universities. Through the ages, it has been the Christians that have come to the rescue, and that's no accident. And it's no accident that right this minute, when you hear something going on, that you will come to the rescue, because you are made in his image, and he's always been about rescuing the beauty. That is what Jesus does. From the point in time where, he made clothes for Adam and Eve, right now to now, he continues to help us to reflect him. And so, it's an absolutely spectacular miracle that we all exist, and miracle that we all have what it takes to take our place in the story. Again, how delightful is the 6th chapter, and the whole idea of the Vav is to delight, and that's 6. And then we have this miracle of 4-score concubines, 3-score queens, and virgins without number. Thanks for listening.